Geert Wilders said, there's no humor in Islam, quoting the Ayatollah Khomeini. And it reminded me, actually, the other day I was in the supermarket and there was a little Muslim boy. He was about 5 years old and he'd gotten separated from his mother. And, you know, they called the store manager and the manager said, "What's your name, little boy?" And he was getting upset and a little teary. And he said, "Muhammad." And the manager said, "And you got separated from your mother?" And he said, "Yes, that's right." "And what does your mother look like, Muhammad?" "I have no idea." So we'll be here all night. Bosch Fawstin did not know that he had won the Judge's Award for $10,000 and was going to be called upon to speak, but he has graciously agreed to say a few words. And just by way of introduction, Pamela already told you about his many accomplishments as a cartoonist, and I wanted to say I myself have known Bosch for many years, and a few years back had the interesting experience of I was supposed to debate with Andrew McCarthy, who you may know from his writings on National Review and so on, about the question, Islam or Islamism? That is the problem in Islam itself, or is it some sort of an offshoot or a subgroup or a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of Islam and so on? And it was supposed to be a straight one-on-one debate, but the moderator was on Andy's side and decided to pack the panel with people who would say it's a wonderful religion of peace and so on. And this was at a David Horowitz Freedom Center event, and David Horowitz very wisely saw what was going on and gave me Bosch on my side to argue for the fact that there's deep trouble within Islam itself, within the core teachings of the Quran and Muhammad, which Bosch is very familiar with, of course, having been born into a Muslim family and raised a Muslim. And so he has exhibited immense courage on a personal and professional level in taking the path that he has. And we all owe him a debt of gratitude in the sense that he is an exemplar for all of us in manifesting the courage that we all need to have. And so let's give a warm welcome to our prize winner, Bosch Fawstin.
Wow, I'm glad to be here. I did prepare something just in case this came about, if I could read it, if you don't mind. So first, I want to thank Pamela Geller, Robert Spencer, for organizing this contest and event. I think it's great, I think it's important. I think this is the absolute proper response to the atrocity at Charlie Hebdo. This is the only way you could do it. And you know, they tell the truth about Islam and Jihad every single day. I'm a cartoonist, I have a blog, I do every so often, I have a comic book series that I do, but I don't do it every day. They do it every day, and we get the benefit of that, to keep the truth that we are at war in our minds every single day. It's important. And however bad things currently are, things would be a lot worse without them. So I just want to thank them here. Thank you very much. And also thank everyone for coming here. I think it's fantastic. It's great turnout. This is important, and if you can see the security out there, why do we need that kind of security? You know, why? Because, you know, the only reason we're talking about Islam is what? Because Islam does not mean peace. That's the only reason we're talking about it. And let me just say something about myself. They mentioned I have a Muslim background, but the problem with even moderate Muslims, I was raised in the Bronx by Albanian Muslim parents, is that the poison of misogyny and Jew hatred gets everyone. I don't care how decent they are, even in the Western Europe, in American Europe. So just in terms of even the misogyny, I don't know of one female in my generation who wasn't beaten by their husbands. I know that my mom used to mourn the birth of my nieces. I was shocked when I first saw it. I didn't know what she was doing, and I found out. Even though being raised around that crap, it still really affected me. And there was a casual admiration for Hitler in my household and my further family. That's why I refer to Hitler as Islam's favorite infidel. They forgive him that he's not Muslim because he killed more Jews than anyone. So it's that kind of casual evil that poisons everyone who calls himself Muslim. I don't care if they're decent. I still have cousins that I somewhat see, you know, talk to here and there, but it's always it's stunted by the fact of the work that I'm doing. But they're not out to kill people, but they are still affected in terrible ways by this ideology. And in terms of drawing Muhammad, I've drawn him about maybe two dozen times over the years. The first time I drew him was after the Danish cartoonists. I never set out to draw Muhammad. I don't think the Danish cartoons ever set out to draw Muhammad. It's just the point that we can't, quote unquote, draw Muhammad. Therefore, what do we do naturally? We draw Muhammad, especially as Westerners, as Americans. And I left Islam in my mid-teens when I began to take morality seriously. I found Ayn Rand's philosophy. And as I put it, I left the most misogynistic ideology on earth and I follow a philosophy created by a woman, which is pretty amazing to me. Then 9/11 hits, and I studied Islamism. My life depended on it. With the help of, after Robert wrote his books, I read every book of his, Andrew Boston, others, on Jihad, on Islam. And I probably overdid it because I wanted to write a comic book post 9/11. I realized that Marvel and DC and other mainstream comics would not touch the issue of Islam. They would never allow Captain America to do what would come naturally to Captain America, take on jihad ruthlessly. He's a super soldier. So I stepped back and I said, okay, what kind of comic book, what kind of hero could I create? And being raised Muslim, we were told that the pig is the most vile creature, in the world. It's disgusting. And so, as I put it, it's Islamic bigotry. Islamic bigotry. That's where Pigman came from. I said, let me have an ex-Muslim superhero dress up in pigskin leather and ruthlessly fight jihad. And then that's my story. It's called The Infidel. I talk about Islam jihad for hours, but let me just say, let me finish by reciting what Pamela Geller said recently about why we draw Muhammad. And she wrote, we draw Muhammad because we are free. We draw Muhammad because our unalienable rights are enshrined in the First Amendment. The freedom of speech is the First Amendment, not the Fifth, or the Eighth, or the 10th, the First. And that's for an important reason. It is the cornerstone of all our other freedoms. We draw Muhammad because, unlike brutal Muslim countries under the Sharia, we do not live under Islamic law. We draw Muhammad because we will not submit. We draw Muhammad because we can. Thank you very much.
Geert Wilders mentioned that the PEN, a writers' association that was founded in order to defend the freedom of expression, is giving an award to the Charlie Hebdo cartoonists. Pamela spoke about this as well. And that the 145 of the members of PEN, including some very prominent writers, Joyce Carol Oates, who you may have heard of, and some others, have pulled out because they say that this is manifesting cultural arrogance. They said that the French manifested cultural arrogance in drawing Muhammad and allowing Charlie Hebdo to draw Muhammad. They don't seem concerned about the cultural arrogance of the assassins who murdered these cartoonists in the name of a blasphemy law that the cartoonists did not hold. They didn't care about that imposition of one culture over another. They only cared that the French were following their own long tradition of free expression. Now that's a terrible thing for an organization that's designed to defend the freedom of expression. It's a terrible dissent, and it bespeaks a dissent in our whole culture in general. You will see around the room, you probably have already noticed as you were coming in, that we have some of the entries into the cartoon contest blown up, and we also have interspersed some historical images of Muhammad. Now, it's very noteworthy. Take a look as you're going out this evening. Take a look at some of these because you'll find them very interesting. Some of them are ancient Persian images made by Muslims. And nobody got killed. Nobody got death threats. Nobody was called a racist. They depict Muhammad cursing women in hell. They depict Muhammad beheading the Qurayza Jews. of which he massacred between 600 and 900, according to his earliest biographer. These are depictions by Muslims of Muhammad. Some of them you'll see his face is covered, but in some of them he's just depicted as he is in the cartoons that are more contemporary. Even more important, there are some images you will find from earlier centuries in the West, when we did have more cultural confidence. Dante Alighieri, the author of the Divine Comedy, it's a three-part allegory, one of the greatest poems in Western civilization, the great Italian poem, and he goes into hell, and then into purgatory, and then into heaven. And in hell, he meets all these people who've been damned to hell. One of them is Muhammad, because Dante was a Christian, and he viewed Muhammad as somebody who had tried to turn people away from the true faith and was thus condemned. His depiction of Muhammad in hell was made into a fresco which is on the wall of a church in Italy. It's been there for centuries. Now it's under armed guard. It was never under armed guard in the 17th century, the 18th century, the 19th century, only now. Why is that? Because now Muslims are, in first place, much more present in the West than they were, but they're a much more aggressive presence in the West, and that is an aggression fueled in large part by our own cultural weakness. A very good friend of mine told me right before I left for this event that you're just poking them in the eye. You're trying to provoke them. You know, why are you doing that? You're the one that's being offensive. And this was a friend, you know, and I was kind of taken aback. And I had to stop and think, well, what exactly is wrong with that? And what's wrong with that is that this is only offensive because Muslims have made it offensive. This is only something, as Geert Wilders said, that needs armed guards because Muslims will kill you for drawing Muhammad. It would never be offensive otherwise. Consider this. The murderers of the Charlie Hebdo cartoonists had an accomplice, and as they were murdering the cartoonists, the accomplice went to a kosher supermarket in Paris and murdered 4 Jews. What had they done? They didn't draw Muhammad. How did they offend Muslims? They offended Muslims by being Jewish. Okay, so we have to not draw Muhammad because that'll poke them in the eye and offend them. And then we have to not be Jewish because that will poke them in the eye and offend them. And then what? Okay, I guess pork and alcohol are right out. Okay, and then what? Take humor, yes, and the Islamic State. The Islamic State is beheading people and taking sex slaves and subjugating the Christians under the hegemony of the Islamic law, and they're doing it all on the basis of Quranic directives, and so that's all Islamic. So I guess we can't say a word about that, because that would poke them in the eye and offend Muslims. And you see, step by step, we're ending up going in the direction of accepting Islamic law. And every Western media outlet that refused to publish the Muhammad cartoons was accepting Islamic blasphemy law. And so I say it's time for a little cultural self-assertiveness. In the 19th century, they didn't have these problems. There's the famous story that I'll close with from the British Raj, the British colonization of India. And in India, the Hindus, not the Muslims, but the Hindus, had the practice of sati, where the widow, the wife of a man who had just died, would be thrown upon his funeral pyre and be burnt to death. And the British outlawed it. And the Hindu delegation came to General Sir Charles Napier, who was the Governor General of the area, and they said to him, "You can't outlaw this. This is our culture." And he said, "Oh, it's your culture. Oh, well then very well. You live out your culture. But we also have a culture. And our culture is that men who force women to throw themselves on fires will be hanged by the neck until dead. So you live out your culture, and then we'll live out ours." In the West, we should be saying exactly that. Yeah, okay, you're going to kill for people who draw Muhammad, then we will protect people who draw Muhammad. And we will hunt you down and kill you for trying to kill people for drawing Muhammad. The freedom of speech is not an end in itself. The freedom of speech was put into the Constitution as our fundamental protection against tyranny. If the governing authority or any power that rules in whatever way, and as Pamela noted, you know, you want to know who rules over you, then find out who you cannot criticize. The people who have the clout, the people who have the power, if they are able to silence by the rule of law, by the force of law, those whose opinions they don't like, then a free society is dead. Then they can do whatever they wish unopposed, and dissent is impossible. And that's what this is all about. This is not about insulting Muslims or offending Muslims or poking them in the eye or even about drawing Muhammad. Ultimately, it's just that that's where they are making the line, then that's where we're going to stand. And we're going to stand against tyranny and for freedom. And so thank you so much for coming, and I will turn the proceedings over to Pamela to close the night's event.
We refuse to allow jihadists to dictate what we can and cannot say. That is the point of this conference. That is the point of freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is the foundation of a free society. Boom, literally. Without it, a tyrant can wreak havoc unopposed while his opponents are silenced. That's why you're here. And when you leave here, it's what you're going to tell your friends. And you're going to post the photos on Facebook. And you're going to show people how to be free and how to be brave and how to have the courage of your convictions. That's what we're doing here. Every newspaper that refused to run the Hebdo cartoons had blood on their hands. Because if every newspaper ran the cartoons from the giddy-up, as they say in Texas, if that Danish cartoon nonsense in 2005, where this small newspaper, had a contest to, draw Muhammad, and it was decided at an OIC conference, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the largest world body of 56 Muslim countries, plus the Palestinian Authority, it was decided that they were going to impose the Sharia. That's what they were going to do. And here we are, 8 years later. You have a president of the United States not only declaring at the UN that the future does not belong to those that slander the prophet, but in the wake of the slaughter of our ambassador and military attaches and consulate attaches, blamed the First Amendment. Completely and utterly falsely, as we now know, there was absolutely no truth to it, but even if there was, blaming the First Amendment, and the only one who went to jail was a YouTube filmmaker. Really the first political prisoner in this country under the Sharia. Think about it. Hillary Clinton, when she met with the families of the dead, of the murdered, said she was going to get that YouTube filmmaker. It's incredible. We are fighting for nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery. That's why you're here. That's why you must go out into the world and advance the fight for freedom. No one is going to save you. You are going to save you. There are no casual observers in this fight. And while they have the largest megaphone, they have the media, they have academia, they have the culture. David won too, David won too. It is the future. It is, look, just the way we revered our grandparents and parents who fought and died in fighting the evil of Nazism. Our children and our grandchildren will despise us for leaving them held hostage by the most extreme and radical ideology on the face of the earth. We must stand up, and if history has taught us anything, it's that small groups, small movements can become huge intellectual movements. We need a revolution of the mind. We're right, we're righteous. Do not back down, never give up, never give in. Take this meeting with you right here and go to work. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. God bless you. God bless you all.